Monday, everybody, and welcome back to the RAD Podcast. I hope y'all have had a great Monday, and the Texas Rangers won, so hey, I hope y'all celebrated good this weekend. Nevertheless, I am one half of this team. My name is Larry Jefferson, and I am very happy to be here to talk about this discussion today.
Man, before we dive in, did you go to the parade?
No, I already being in Arlington I already knew it was going to be chaotic. And then when they let all the Arlington ISD schools out
Yeah,
and Mansfield, I said,
and
"Oh
Mansfield.
no, I'm not going to even torture myself like that. I'm gonna stay right here at this job and watch because they were showing it online too.
Yeah,
So nah, mm-mm,
yeah. I
no,
wanted to
not
get out it.
me.
I wanted to get out into it, man. But I was busy here at work, and then shoot, by the time I got home, got done with the family and stuff, man, it was late, and I had to be back up here at work at 6 because we were taking students somewhere. So I was like, yeah, nah, I'm not gonna make it to anything, man. So,
Now how
but
they let us out for the day?
yeah, now that would have been good. Yeah. Well, hey, Dantrayl Smith, glad to be here. If you didn't get an opportunity to tune in to our previous episode last week, we talked about the DEI and Shackles series. We talked about the impact of the legislative laws in higher ed. And so, great conversation. Make sure you go back, watch it on YouTube. You also can listen to it on your audio platforms such as iTunes, iHeartRadio, so forth and so on, wherever you receive music or podcasts, you can listen to us there. So make sure you tune in, check us out. But Larry, man, I'm excited about today. It's going to be a phenomenal episode as we talk about DEI's effect and being in shackles in the nonprofit sector, man. So excited about these two
Oh,
brothers we got coming on today.
well, shoot, let them introduce themselves. Go right ahead.
Jonathan, please be my guest.
Yeah, no, look, gents, I appreciate you all having me today. It's an honor. I do listen and I followed some of the topics and, to be joining this group and to really dissect some of the greatest challenges I think our generation is facing is critical for us. And so I'm John Prod. I'm the executive director for Empower Texas. I am a military veteran. I heard you guys talk about Rangers fan. I'm not a Rangers fan. I'm a New York Yankee. And so I rep my Yankees hard. Listen, I rep them hard. I was happy when they beat the Astros, so it was the only time I rooted for anyone
Oh,
but the
okay.
Yankees. But
Did they make it
I,
to the playoffs?
you know what? Next conversation.
Nope.
So I'm glad you guys invited me, but I'm actually out here on that line. So I'll see y'all later. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm a military veteran. I served 8 years in the Army as a military intelligence officer. I've recently joined Empower about 3 years ago, and I am just this work is my passion. Helping people who are marginalized, underserved, underrepresented get an access to opportunity is, I think, my life's calling. I think, spiritually it's kind of my spiritual calling, and I'm excited to be here. So I'll stop talking. I'll let Raul introduce himself, and I definitely want to dive in with y'all.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. So my name is Raul T. Pereira. My friends call me RTP, and I'm with RTP Learning. I'm a solopreneur. I'm a HR consultant, and in RTP Learning, I suppose my tagline is I empower socially conscious leaders with DEI leadership skills to transform employee behavior, reduce turnover, and enhance retention. And that almost sounds kind of like nice and packaged, but what that really means is I've been in the HR game for, I don't know, 20 plus years. And I've been working with nonprofits ever since probably around the same time, 20 plus years, maybe going on 30 now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a great ride and I enjoy it. Uh, and I'm glad to be part of this forum. I'm glad to talk about DEI. I'm probably like Jonathan, I can probably talk forever about something that I'm passionate about. But if you want to remember me, I'm the guy who likes to help people. At the end of the day, that's part of my passion as well. I identify with Jonathan. I've been put on this earth to help others And, with nonprofits, I have a sweet spot now as a consultant that whatever I can do to help advance the conversation around leadership or advancing your mission or even supporting your human resources or DEI initiatives, I'm your guy. I try my best to get out there and just be of service, if you will. So thank you for having me on the show.
Yes, sir. Excited, man.
Dantrayl, you want to kick it off?
Yes, sir. I got you. So, first question we have for our panelists is talk a little bit about how do legislative laws aim at removing DEI efforts, right? So we talked about how the news legislators happen, particularly here in the state of Texas, but how does it affect marginalized communities that they rely so heavily on nonprofit organizations for resources and support?
Jonathan, I believe in respect, and I would love for you to always kick it forward, and then I'll bounce off your energy, because then I'd want to hog it all up. Is that okay?
Yeah, you know what? I take that as a compliment, so I'm gonna jump first. It's such a great question, right? And I think it's a layered question. I think marginalized communities exist across the state of Texas, across the United States, in every inner city, every community. I mentioned that I'm a New York Yankee. I'm actually from New York City, right? And I grew up in one of the 5 boroughs. And I remember as a kid, this idea that you grow up, you graduate high school, you go to college, and then you go get a job, right? And this idea that everyone has to go to college. Well, the reality of it, especially in the nonprofit space, is we recognize that everyone isn't meant to go to Harvard, right? Everyone's not meant to go to Texas A&M or to UT Austin, right? Everyone's not meant to even go to a community college. Some people just have different callings in life, and when you take a program that is designed to enhance and encourage companies, organizations, colleges, any type of entity to encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion, all you're saying is we're making the playing field level, right? We're not giving anyone a hand up. We're not giving you a hand out. We're not giving you a hand down. We're not lowering the bar. We're just saying that everyone, regardless of your education, your background, your city, your creed, your nationality, your sexual orientation, whatever it is, has a right and has access to compete for something, right? Insert that something. And, when there are legislative actions, especially in the state of Texas, that are designed to break down the requirement to give everyone a fair opportunity, all you're doing is handicapping the marginalized communities that are already disconnected, the folks who don't have the access to the opportunity. And, Raul, I can talk all day, man, so you're gonna have to cut me off, but I'll say one more thing before you do cut me off, right? If you look at, and this is according to the National Center of Education Statistics, right? I'm not a big data guy, but I think it is relevant at certain points. And this is one of them. If you look at this racial distribution of college graduates in America, and this is according to the National Center for Education Statistics in 2021, right, which was around the time of the last census, 54% of college graduates in America were white. 16.88% or so were Hispanic, 10.7% were Black of the total college graduate population in America, right? Well, when you take that data point and you match it up against the amount of eligible working adults there are in America, you get a pretty big disparity. Whereas you look at 61% of the eligible workforce is white. So 54% have college, 61% of the eligible workforce is white. So when you look at a marginalized community, which historically has been Black and brown communities, they don't even have access if there weren't DEI initiatives in place. So once you remove them, where's the gap? Where's the bridge? Where's the pathway? Or I know you were going to say something, but again, I've got more points to make. Go ahead, jump on in, man.
No, that's awesome. I mean, thank you those are great stats, and the reality is those of you who are currently involved in nonprofits, it takes a very special person with a big heart and commitment, because one of the problems with nonprofits is in terms of the staff and the employees is that we get burned out. You know what I mean? We care,
Right.
we jump in, we want to do all this great stuff. So then you have these legislative bills coming out across the nation. You know, Texas, the anti-CRT, and was that anti-woke in Florida, for example. That, you know, it starts to instill fear, right? And I'm here to tell folks that, hey, you know what? Yes, that fear can seem very real, but at the same time, you have to remember why you're here. You're here for the community, right? And you're here for the marginalized community, for those who need advocacy, those who need that support, who need you as a person to come in and speak on their behalf, to advocate on their behalf, whether it may be reproductive, themed kind of services, higher education to get kids transition from junior high to high school, or gang members, whatever the cause is. That's the part that we have to remember as individuals. Yes, we came in with a big heart, and we have to look inward to our heart and remember that we are still advocates. The world outside, in terms of legislation and laws, will continue to evolve. Now, what we need to remember is, or we cannot forget rather, is that we're advocates, right? And we're still in charge of understanding our communities. We're still in charge of knowing what those needs are, right? So we look at the communities that we serve, then we need to remember that they need to reflect who we are. As the service providers, right? So
Right.
when we start rolling back DEI or anti-CRT initiatives that affect nonprofits, we tend to react out of fear. And what I tend to tell folks now is, yes, embrace that fear, but now we need to go back, you know, to the basics and remember why we got involved in the first place, and not lose sight of our role as advocates for our communities.
Yeah, and let me just say one more thing to that point, Raul, right? And why we advocate. And this is, you know, I was telling Dr. Smith this comment just recently, right? I had the honor to visit Black Wall Street, right, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in 1921, right, we're going back 100 plus years. In 1921, Black Wall Street was the richest and densest population of wealth, Black wealth in America at the time. And it mirrored and matched Wall Street in 1921, right? The dollar, the US dollar at the time in 1921 would turn over 5 times in the Tulsa community before it left the community. Think about that. Yeah. What was it empowering? Businesses, right? Livelihoods, farming, distribution, trade, transportation, you name it, right? The dollar went into the community and it stayed in the community. And then after 5 times of it being spent, it would leave to a neighboring town, city, state, wherever, right? Think about that, 5 times. When you look at the marginalized communities today that rely on nonprofit, relies on public assistance, relies on advocacy and consortiums and collaboratives and dedicated and concerted efforts to change the narrative for that community. Where are the dollars going? They come in, right? Right. They come in via fundraising, nonprofit philanthropy. They come in from high net worth donors. They come in from these larger organizations that are committed to serving the nonprofit, serving the community. They pour money into these communities via social services, via public assistance. Where does that money go, though? Right? Does it turn over 5 times like it did 100 years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma? No. I'm guessing not, right? I don't have the data points there, but I'm guessing that money comes and is spent one time at the local convenience store for groceries because there's a food shortage, there's food scarcity. I'm guessing it's all paid to a rent or a housing complex, right? That is a one-time expense because that person's own it in California or New York. It's a real estate investment, right? I'm guessing that it's spent all in one swoop on childcare because it's hard for a working adult to go drive to work when they have no one to watch their kids at home. That's the impact of legislative action against DEI. when you don't give people who go to school or don't go to school, they go to prison or they don't go to prison, right? They go to the military and they come back, like whatever the life circumstances are, the impact of legislative action against DEI to those marginalized communities, it's removing the exit, it's removing the upward mobility, it's removing the education attainment and everything that we're doing in the nonprofit space is aimed to alleviate these pressure points that are pushed down by requirements to do certain things. And so, Raul, to your point, we need advocacy everywhere. It's not just people like the four of us who have a heart to serve. It's people in Congress. It's the President of the United States. It's the Supreme Court, right? It's these entities that we elect and we put in place to represent us, to give us access to opportunity so that we can then make a better living for ourselves, our families, and our communities.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I do want to mention one other point, that if we let fear or we're paralyzed by this fear, and sometimes, based on reality, then it also impacts our recruitment and retention efforts, right? That's a big impact. If we're not able to keep people, right? If I'm recruited and I come in with my big old heart and here I am ready to rock and roll and engage my community and be an advocate, but if the leadership there and the organization just doesn't have it together, or they're not making this commitment to diversity or equity or inclusion, or even just to a non-toxic work culture, then guess what? I'm going to go somewhere else. So these types of legislative bills that pass or are being challenged, they also have that real impact to the organization for recruitment and retaining good people to serve the community. So there's that real impact to the organization as well.
That's right.
And both you gentlemen make some very, very, very valid points. And I can agree with you, being that I come from a nonprofit sector before I got into higher education, about the burnout of wanting to pour back into the communities, but constantly hitting roadblocks. So the next question asks, what are the potential consequences that will arise due to all the changes? And how does that impact nonprofits at a large? And for us, how they do their work?
Yeah, I mean, it's another really good question, right? And it's multi-leveled. I'm a storyteller nonprofit, Larry. You know, coming from your past life, that our job is to tell stories and make it better for people.
Big time.
So I recently was speaking to a superintendent for a Texas school district. Okay, and she was telling me about this district star student, right? This person had everything going for themselves. They had, 4.0 plus. They were getting offers to colleges. They were going places. Okay. And this superintendent told me that this student had a full 4-year ride, academic, to a major college in the state of Texas, right? Again, I'm not trying to give names, so this is what I'll keep it very vanilla, right?
Yeah.
And so this is what I'll say. She had a full ride to a 4-year university in the state of Texas, and everybody in the school was behind this student. They were like,
wow,
leave the community, forget what you got. This is a 1 in a million opportunity. You're smart, you're a scholar, you could be an astronaut, whatever. I don't know, whatever they were saying. But what they didn't ask the student one time in this whole process of pushing her, standing behind them, right, and really advocating for them to go on and go earn their better life, was, what are they leaving behind? Well,
wow.
It turns out that this student was the oldest of 4, single mom, Hispanic, lived in, the inner city, a marginalized community, on food stamps, on public assistance. They worked in high school at nights and weekends, and they were the breadwinner for that family. So leaving to go on to chase your dream for that person meant to everyone else that they were chasing success. But to that person, it meant leaving behind their support channel. It meant leaving behind the people who held them down for 18 years. It meant leaving behind the lifestyle and the support and everything that they did for that family. And that student said no. That student stayed home, did not enroll in college, did not pursue that opportunity, and to this day is working the same job they worked while they were in high school. So,
Wow.
Larry, to
Incredible.
your question, right? You're asking what is the consequence of rolling back DEI? DEI in this case wasn't the education because this student had the education. They had the
Right.
opportunity to go. DEI means more than just education. It means more than just affirmative action. DEI means, are there real and sustainable and measurable support channels at home that
Mm.
can support a family so that the kids can go and leave the
And
nest and not
resources.
worry about it? That's right.
Yeah.
Wow,
Wow.
that's an incredible
I,
story, and folks, Hispanic people, at least first generation parents came from Mexico, and we're very proud people and very very hardworking people for that matter. So that story resonates and it breaks my heart, but I've heard that story before, growing up in the 80s and in the 90s, believe it or not, and you still hear it today. Um, One of the consequences that's tied to your story, your awesome story, Jonathan, well, powerful story rather, that I also thought about now is there might be a bigger gap in understanding, right? So if you don't have the people in your nonprofit organization who are in tune with the cultural realities of this young lady,
Wow.
are not unable to ask those questions,
Yep.
just like in this case, then you can multiply that reality and you see it play out in different stories throughout the nation and even throughout the world. Um, and that's a sad reality right there, because if we going back to my point of recruitment and retention, you're trying to get people who understand the community you serve. And that's a big consequence. If you don't have an understanding of the community and the community's needs, if you don't understand this young lady's uh, uh, her bigger desire to stay home and provide for her family was bigger than her desire to get a higher education, right? And I'm not criticizing this young lady, but that if you don't have an advocate who understands that and is able to engage with this young lady or young person, perhaps you could look at different resources. Perhaps you can have those heart-to-heart conversations and maybe nudge her in the direction of higher education to look at long-term capacity building versus the immediate short-term reality of the marginalized community and the situation at home.
So
Yeah.
I have a kind of follow-up question. Jonathan, you talked a little bit about in the first response about data, right? You shared about the statistics in terms of individuals who don't look like the people here on this screen that are in the job force. Can both of you all talk a little bit about, because this is how I feel, right? Like I feel like we have these great nonprofits doing some phenomenal things in the community who have people get burnt out, they leave or they go to better opportunities, right? But then you get these individuals who don't look like us to come in and take on these roles, right? Like, oh, I feel like, I got this, I just want to give back to the community, right? Like it just makes me feel good when I do these things. But yet they don't really understand or even come from any of these communities, right? And so then you get talk about like what's that relationship like for those individuals like that look like us when they see these type of individuals running and working in these nonprofits.
Yeah, I think I'm torn on this answer. I think there's enough need in the communities for everyone to do their part, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their background, regardless of their skin color. I think that there's enough hurting on the streets right now today for everyone to help somebody reach out, right? Reach up and grab somebody next to you. But I completely and wholeheartedly agree in that it's hard to empathize. It's hard to sympathize, excuse me. It's hard to sympathize when the person can't empathize, right? If I am going through a situation in my life and people like me are going through the same exact situation, and if someone who does not look like me comes in with the hand and say, this is how you get out of it, I'm not going to trust it, right? So I think it comes down to trust. I think if someone who has a genuine heart to serve can come to an organization like a nonprofit or like some type of, consortium that is committed to making a difference, they've got to first ask that question Raul did. What do you need? Not what do I need to do for you? What do you need me to do for me? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, you got to ask the right question. And if you could break down that initial barrier, I don't think it matters. I think the challenge that a lot of big nonprofits face is it's a branch in a box, right? Like, we're the same in California as we are the same in Texas, and we're the same in New York. And it's one flavor. This is what we do. Take it or leave it. We're in the community. We set it up right next to you. Whereas sometimes it just takes a different tailored approach to each market, because no two people are alike and no two communities are alike. Raul, what do you think?
You know what, Dr. Smith, you asked a great question that's very dear to my heart. I'm going to share something.
That's why I asked it, man.
I know, right. I'm going to share something that's not going to be popular, but
Let's
it's been
go.
my experience. I feel you, Jonathan. I do get torn. If somebody doesn't look like me or not look like me, but in my 20 plus years in nonprofits, unfortunately, and this is a sucky part that I'm going to share, but people who look like me, there's been quite a few times in leadership where they're the very same people who are putting on the oppressive, and they're telling me to go F off because, I'm not putting in 20 hours or 18 hours a day. And it goes back to what you said, Jonathan. It's about trust, because I've seen, the whitest person in the world from come in with a big ass heart, and they're beautiful people, big old spirit. And yeah, they don't look like my community, but shit, they're moving to my community. They're there. They're getting, lifting up their sleeves, and they're working hand to hand. So I'm torn, but
yeah, I hear it. Yeah,
it's unfortunate, man. Our people were beautiful, we're great. I'm not trying to stereotype at all. I'm just saying my experience that I've seen where there's issues that happen in nonprofits at all different levels, and we need to have that person who is going to be courageous, and it starts with leadership. You got to be able to call out bad behavior, and you got to be able to step down, whether you're white, black, or brown, and say, you know what, I'm not motivated by power, or you know what, I'm going to step down because, we have Raul, or we have Jonathan, or we have somebody else who can do a better job than I can, regardless of my skin color. And that's my call.
I look, I'm gonna counter what you said, but I completely agree with what you're saying, because that's how it is, period. Right. I think the challenge, especially the question that's asked, is what are the consequences long term? And what you're describing, Raul, is the plantation mentality that still exists today. Right? It's real. And the reason why it's real, Raul and Dantrayl and Larry, is because there are so few opportunities. So they don't share the opportunity because it may be the only one you get. And I'm not saying it's right, or I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying it is the way it is. Because when you have, like I mentioned in my first statistic, when you've got, 100% of the available workforce, 64% of which are white, 54% of which have a college degree, and the rest of them, the minority, the collective minority, is competing for fewer jobs, how then is it going to be equal? Unless there's a concerted effort to level the playing field. Because if there were more access and more opportunities for people of all colors, all walks of life, I believe that there will be more hands down. Again, since you got real, I'm gonna get real too, right? Like, I'm an African-American man in America, right? And I've come from, I'm one of 13 siblings. right? From 3 marriages in my parents, right? And one of 13, and they're spread out all over Texas. And you know what? The first chance I get, and God forbid I hit the lottery, I'm pulling some cousins up. I'm pulling up cousin Tyrone down in Oklahoma. Like, come on up with me, right? Because I don't have to worry about competing with you, Raul. I know that my family is going to be set and I can make ways for other people. But the problem that we have is there are so few opportunities for people that this plantation mentality still exists where I'm inside the house, so I don't have to go pick cotton. I'm going to look down on the people who pick cotton, even though we come from the same thing, even though we're victims of the same system, even though we may look different, have different skin complexions, right? If you're not a European descendant, a white Caucasian American, you're a victim of slavery somewhere, right? Native, African, West Indian, Central American, indigenous, right? Like, so we're all on the same playing field, but we've created this plantation mentality where it's okay for me to hold someone who looks like me back because I got to go get mines for me and mine. And that's where it has to stop. And if we don't collectively attempt to break that dynamic, that dichotomy that exists between, you know, status, race, and background, or education, race, and job career, or whatever it is, then we'll never do it. And it's just a vicious cycle that repeats and repeats.
It's been repeating for a long time too.
400 years, right?
For a long time.
Long time. Yeah, I like that plantation mentality analogy because it's like, from a historical standpoint, you know, we are people of conquest, we are people of slavery, you know, and it's like we begin to internalize that stuff. And you know, I guess what I'm saying is, it takes courage, man. At the end of the day, no matter who you are, you have to remember that you signed up for this, you know, this as your mission, right? Organizational mission in nonprofits. You know, the thick, the bad, the good, the ugly, that you have to be able to rally the support and trust of your people, regardless of who you are and what you look like. Because if you don't, I can tell you this, I don't have the statistics, but there's a high level of attrition, in especially in nonprofits. You know, people get burned out, and people are like, oh, look, here's Uncle Tom, you know, for example, expanding the plantation analogy, and it's like, I'm out. You know, I felt that, and I'm not a one to go deep into that or continue down that path, because I get it. I mean, I'm with you, Jonathan. I totally get it. And it almost, I think that a point that I'll make in a bit about why we get stuck sometimes, and why the rollback to DEI is so detrimental to nonprofits is something that I'll talk about in a bit, because I believe in building bridges more than breaking them down. Although, again, unpopular. I mean, although at some point, you know, violence and civil rights and all that stuff has its place. Now we need to answer ourselves. We need to answer our, you know, does that form of militant approach have a place in a nonprofit? Probably not. But you know, I'm gonna stop there, and we'll go on to question number 3.
Let me just. I want to say one more thing, Dantrayl, just if I can. And this is another point Raul made. Real quick, I'll keep it short. So in a past life, okay, I was at a company, and I was the only Black like senior leader in this organization, right? Predominantly white industry, predominantly white company. I was the only Black leader in this organization, the only one, okay? And this company, trying to be DEI conscious, came to me and asked me to stand up their DEI ERG.
Of course.
Tokenism.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Right? So again, so now look at the spot I'm put in. If I start talking to this industry and this company and the people who don't look like me to talk about equality and diversity and equity, right, and inclusion and all that, am I the Uncle Tom? Right? Like, oh, look at this token. Or am I somebody who could be the change I want to see in the organization? So like, that's the other side of it at nonprofits. It's the other side of it in corporations. It's the other side of it in the federal government or city, local, state, municipalities, right? You can choose to be the token, quote unquote, off if you know you're the change you want to see, like Gandhi said, or you can be the token and say, look at me, I've got power to impact and influence how you live in this organization or this company, this city, this state, whatever. So I'll leave it there, Dantrayl, because that's the question that nonprofit space specifically is: how do we use our influence? We're getting funded to do something. We can be the person who comes in and be the savior of the community. We can be an advocate, like Raul said, and be a champion of the community. We can be a sponsor of the community, like a corporation might do. Or we can be a foundation that just says, look, I've got $100 million to give to this community. You all tell me how I spend it. So I think that's the question that is inherent with DEI as it relates to the community at large and as it relates to nonprofits in general.
So I got one more question I ask, but before I ask this final question, want to give the opportunity to our audience members if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask our panelists a question.
I don't have a question, but this is interesting. So y'all just keep it going. Thank you.
Wait,
All right. Well, next question I have is, one of the things is we always want our listeners to really walk away with some tangible resources, right? So if they're in this sector, for those that are listening or will be listening to this episode, we want to ensure that they're getting some of that motivation and tools that they can equip themselves with to really kind of battle the spaces that they're at. So talk a little bit about, in face of legislative challenges, right, that are happening to affect DEI efforts, what specific strategies can individuals and organizations really employ to continue promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion work, particularly in the nonprofit area?
Earl, you want to take? Am I kicking it off again?
sure. Yeah, I can start.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
thank you. So there's a couple of levels here. I began to talk about, I like to build bridges, right? Instead of breaking them down, be an agent for change. One of the things I believe in, and the kind of flavor I like to practice in human resources and strategic approach to DEI, is looking at behavioral change, right? Many of any initiative, DEI, at a nonprofit or corporate America, any employee engagement initiative, the biggest reasons why they fail are they're associated to there's no buy-in from the leadership. It's not a holistic approach, right? We all heard that before. But one of the reality is that we as leadership, we say this is the solution, and we forget to include, even though we're moving towards inclusion, include our white folk, for example, and we make them feel like shit, right? So we start off with a solution, and we start off with an adversarial relationship already. So that's why sometimes that stuff doesn't stick or doesn't work out that great. What I like to say is, in psychology, there's this concept called solution aversion, right? Your solution does, I don't like it. It doesn't agree with my beliefs and my ideals and my ideology. So what we need to do is take a step back and begin to have conversations with white, brown, black, everybody. And this, I'm talking just in terms of your organization. You have to have the conversation is, can we agree that there is a problem? If we can agree there's a problem, can we agree on an approach? Can we begin to unpack this, right? So that's like the first kind of conceptual strategy. Like let's pause a little bit. And now my other part is we need to remember that we are mission driven. So once you figure out if in fact you want to engage with all of your people with figuring out that we all agree there's a problem, now we need to have at least a half day or a full day retreat.
There you go.
Where you look at your mission and values as an organization, and you have 4 critical questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? And how will we know when we're successful? Or how will we know when we arrived? And we go back to the basics. You know, don't be paralyzed by fear, because we are in this highly heightened political atmosphere where DEI and CRT are under attack. Yes, but we go back to our basics, our mission, and we have that retreat. We realign ourselves. We align our, whatever comes out of the retreat, that's what you follow. You have your job descriptions, your performance appraisal process, everything comes out of that retreat and you start anew.
Yeah, I underscore everything you said. And you said it so eloquently and perfectly that I won't even add to it, because that's the answer. Step 1, right? It's ask the questions, get, agreement and consensus, and then execute together. I think separately, but almost as equally, right? Raul is, and I'm gonna quote one of my favorite bands, not bands, one of my favorite hip hop groups, because I'm from Staten Island. So I'm gonna quote the Wu-Tang. And I'm gonna say cash rules everything around me, cream, right? Financial literacy.
Yeah.
This idea of value it has deteriorated in marginalized communities. And I believe if somebody wants to support a nonprofit, support through financial literacy.
Absolutely.
Young folks do not understand the value of a dollar.
Wow.
And that's race independent. That's white, Black, Hispanic, Native, Asian, you name it. There is a chasm that is quickly widening with people who understand the value of the dollar and people who do not. So when a nonprofit works with somebody to get them on the pathway, hey, I'm gonna get you a job making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, right? You've never made that much money. Probably no one in your family has made that much money. We're gonna put you on a pathway where you can now have a car and you can drive to and commute to work. What's to stop them from going to buy a G-Wagon, right? Or an F-150 in an apartment complex, right? Or, what's to stop somebody from going out and spending their entire check on technology, the newest phone, the newest computers, the newest shoes, the newest clothes? We need to educate current and future generations on the value of the dollar. That is why the gap between the rich and everyone else isn't getting closer, it's getting wider, because the rich know it and they don't share it. And the rest of us are just trying to figure it out. So we're living check to check. So it doesn't matter what a company does. It doesn't matter what our government does. It doesn't matter what any of us do. If we level the playing field for everybody, if we don't teach people what to do with their dollars, it's all going to be the same vicious cycle, because they're going to blow it on things there's no return on investment, and they're in the same cycle. And because there's no generational wealth,
right?
They're going to be stuck living check to check. You see what I'm saying? So everything that Raul said is what I say. However, financial literacy at all levels, from the household to the community to the local YMCAs to the local Goodwills to you name it, help teach financial literacy. And if you can't find an organization that aligns with your personal values, start your own. It don't cost anything to teach somebody about money.
Yeah. Wow.
Well said.
Thank you. Both of you gentlemen have dropped some great information. And being I'm from nonprofit, I could just resonate with everything that's being said, and greatly appreciate what you've shared today. Dantrayl, how does your quote relate?
Man, so this quote comes from a former businesswoman and CEO that kind of works in a nonprofit area. Her name is Inga Beale. And so she talks about many conversations about diversity and inclusion do not happen in the boardroom because people, one, are embarrassed at using unfamiliar words, or two, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Yet this is the very place we need to be talking about it. The business case speaks for itself. Diverse teams are more innovative and successful in going after new markets.
Mm.
So yeah, man, gentlemen, I appreciate you all. To all of our listeners, thank you so much. Make sure you all
Yeah.
tune in. Make sure y'all tune in for us next week as we kind of shift gears and we talk a little bit about the healthy communication of the heart is the title of the next area. And we're going to be diving into what's going to be called love and wellness. And so we have some very special relationship counselors that are going to be coming on and talking to us a little bit about personal journeys and in establishing strong and loving relationships, not only with your significant others, but also within your work environment and other environments that you share. So make sure you
Glad you
tune
said that
in.
part,
Tune
Trill.
in. What'd you say?
I said I'm glad you said that part.
Yeah. So make sure y'all tune in next week. But to my brothers today, man, y'all shut it down, man. I appreciate y'all. Man, we
Yeah.
definitely
No.
appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
the
having us.
yeah. Thanks
It's
for the
beautiful.
invite. Yeah, I love what you all are doing. I love the energy, the passion. I love everything you guys are about. And I'll tell you, the community needs more of it. So happy to be of assistance in any possible way. Hey, I'm gonna do a shameless plug. Go buy my book, Caterpillars Don't Fly. I'm a author and I share my ideology a little bit more on that. So Caterpillars Don't Fly. You can buy it any bookstore, online, or in retail.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being part of the conversation. And I'll love to do it again. And if anybody, any of the listeners want to reach out for a 30-minute free consultation, hit me up, Raul at rtplearning.com, Raul at rtplearning.com. I
Can
provide
you put it
leadership
in the
support.
can you type it in the chat?
Where's my chat here? Give me.
It's up at the top. It says chat.
Oh man. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let me put my. You're making me work now here. At rtplearning.com. So that's my email address. Anybody, and I'm the guy who likes to help people. So if you have a question about strategy for your HR department or DEI initiative, and you just want to bounce off an idea, hey, I'll be more than happy to schedule some time with you. It's all good. And if you're just an individual who wants to learn more about, well, what kind of leadership skills are most important for me to grow as a person, I'll point you in the right direction. Thanks for having me.
Good
I
deal.
appreciate
Mr.
Great.
Jonathan, excuse me, did you put your information in about your book and the locate where we can get? You said any
in the chat.
bookstore? Oh, it's in the chat.
I
That's
sure
right.
did. It's in the chat. Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Nobles. You can get it on any place books are sold.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Take care. It was awesome. Beautiful. Great conversation.
Yep, agreed.
Appreciate you guys. And until next Monday, we will see y'all later. Signing off.
Take